The future of South African TV may be changing far faster than most viewers realize. You see, over the past few months, MultiChoice, the company behind DSTV, has quietly started looking very different. And the biggest signal came just this week when its new owner, French media giant Canal Plus, decided to pull the plug on Showmax. Now, that's a pretty dramatic move considering that Showmax was supposed to be MultiChoice's answer to Netflix, the platform that would carry the company into the streaming era. So to understand why this matters, you need to rewind a bit. You see, Showmax launched back in 2015 when it became clear that these global streaming platforms were coming for traditional TV. Netflix was expanding, Amazon was growing, and viewers were starting to expect on-demand content instead of fixed schedules. And so MultiChoice's response to this was to build out its own streaming service. And over the years, it poured billions of rands into technology, content, and international partnerships to try and turn Showmax into a serious pan-African streaming platform. But rather unsurprisingly, trying to compete with global streaming giants turns out to be pretty expensive. You see, Netflix spends billions of dollars on content every year, numbers that are almost impossible for regional broadcasters to match. So Showmax's losses kept climbing, and when Canal Plus took control of MultiChoice last year, the new leadership quickly started reviewing which parts of the business actually made financial sense. And this Showmax decision is just the latest sign that things are shifting. I mean, earlier this year, MultiChoice nearly lost its long-running deal with Warner Bros. Discovery, which would have meant channels like Discovery, TLC, and Cartoon Network disappearing from DSTV entirely before a last-minute agreement came through. So between that scare and this shutdown of Showmax, the message is clear. Canal Plus is actively reshaping the company. And so exactly what South African TV looks like on the other side of that process is still unclear. But hey, after decades of relative stability, this industry may be entering one of its biggest periods of change yet. So one of the biggest technological shifts happening right now isn't in Silicon Valley. It is happening across Africa. You see, over the past few years, internet access across the continent has been climbing rapidly as mobile networks expand and smartphones become more affordable. But what's most interesting is how quickly that change is accelerating. Now, part of that comes from better connectivity. You see, mobile networks are expanding deeper into rural areas, and satellite services like Starlink are helping to bring internet access to places that never had traditional infrastructure. But the other big barrier here is the device itself. And so that's why the global mobile industry group GSMA has now launched a plan to pilot a $40 4G smartphone in 6 African countries, including Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Rwanda, working with operators like MTN and Vodacom. And so just think about this for a second. This access opens up a lot more than just social media. You see, smartphones have increasingly become a gateway to mobile banking, online education, e-commerce, and government services across the continent. But it also means that millions of people will be encountering the modern internet with everything that comes with it, from misinformation to AI scams, for the very first time. In other words, Africa's digital boom is creating enormous opportunity, but it's also happening at a relentless pace. So if you've ever wondered how a war on the other side of the world can affect prices here at home, the answer in this case is shipping routes. You see, the global economy runs on what are basically invisible ocean highways, these narrow sea corridors where cargo ships move everything from food, fuel, electronics, and clothing around the planet. And so when one of those highways suddenly become too dangerous to use, the entire system has to reroute. So that's the situation unfolding in the Middle East right now. You see, after escalating military strikes between Iran, the United States, and Israel, the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil transit routes in the world, has effectively become too risky for many shipping companies. And so under normal conditions, around 138 ships pass through that strait every single day. But traffic there has recently collapsed by roughly 90% as vessels just avoid the area. So as a result, ships are now taking the long way around. Literally. You see, instead of cutting through the Middle East towards the Suez Canal, many are now setting south around South Africa before heading towards Europe and the United States. Now, that detour can add up to 2 extra weeks at sea, raising transport costs and slowing deliveries. And those pressures eventually ripple throughout the global economy, including here in South Africa. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, Cape Town Mayor John Hill Lewis appears to be the next leader of the Democratic Alliance, with support from 7 of the party's 9 provincial leaders, ahead of the April leadership election. South Africa's High Court has ruled that the finance minister cannot change the VAT rate through the national budget before Parliament approves it, saying decisions about taxes must ultimately be made by elected lawmakers, not the executive. And Uber South Africa has announced a series of new partnerships aimed at cutting costs and boosting earnings for drivers, including deals on vehicle financing, insurance, tires, fuel savings, and even taxi top advertising. And just a quick side note, if you're enjoying today's show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It's the only way we grow. You can also join our awesome community, the Bagel Community Broadcast channel on Instagram or on YouTube under the Post tab. That's where we'll share behind the scenes stuff, trivias, and even ask for your inputs on the show. And so if you'd like to help to shape this show and the news that we cover, that's the place to do it. Get involved. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, which African river is the second longest on the continent after the Nile? Is it A, the Orange River, B, the Congo River, or C, the Zambezi River? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Rangers in the Kruger National Park recently spotted something in the bush that they almost never see. 2 young rhino calves wandering out on their own. And hey, that's not usually a good sign. At just 12 to 14 months old, they should usually be glued to their mothers, which means that when the rangers find them like this, it usually signals that something has gone very wrong. So that discovery sets off a rescue operation involving Sandparks rangers, wildlife veterinarians, helicopter pilots, and the team at the Care for Wild Rhino Sanctuary. And the terrain was pretty tricky. Vehicles couldn't reach one of the calves, and so rescuers had to sedate it and lift it out by helicopter just to get it to the nearest road. The second calf was flown directly to the sanctuary, where both animals are now being closely monitored. So as you can imagine, young rhinos rarely survive long enough on their own in the wild. Without their mothers, they struggle to find food and water, and they are far more exposed to predators and human threats. South Africa reportedly lost 352 rhinos to poaching in 2025, although that was down from 420 the year before. And so in this case, what started as a worrying discovery ended with 2 calves getting a second chance. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is the Congo River, stretching roughly 4,700 kilometers across Central Africa, making it the second longest river on the continent after the Nile. Now, interestingly enough, while the Nile does win on length, the Congo is actually far more powerful, carrying the largest volume of water of any river in Africa and second in the world after the Amazon. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in until the very end. I hope you guys all had a fantastic weekend. Wishing you all a cracker Monday. Remember, be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.